Hey, it's Dallas J. Moore here on SocialRepublic.com. This week, kind of important, I wanted to talk about your brand. No, not you, and not you, the guy in the back. So, talking about your brand, it's important to realize that people have perceptions of brands. I think we already know that to a degree, but what we may or may not know is if they're positive or negative. And I think that there is a pretty big difference between a business and a brand. I think as a brand is something that becomes established, becomes memorable, that has a story, it has meaning, it has kind of guts to it. And I think all brands, well, all businesses aspire to be brands, to be well known and to be established and to have a story and to have a culture behind it. And it takes a while to build this. One thing you're going to kind of have to pay attention to is time. Time is something that is just what it is. Sometimes it just takes time to build a quality brand, a memorable brand, and something that evolves and sticks with people. The other thing you have to kind of keep in mind is, are you offering ownership in your brand? People want to be able to feel like they're a part of something and that they have a place where they can share and be with others who are similar and feel similar about the things that they are passionate about and things that are important to them. So those are two things to keep in mind: time and ownership. And those two things do take time, and it also is things that change. Your brand will evolve, and as business evolves and as consumers and customers' needs and wants and desires change, so will your brand. It will evolve, and that's a good thing. But it's important to know that your brand is something that is really hard to wrap your head around. I think branding, marketing, and even social media now has been terms that have been thrown around all too lightly maybe, and it's a little convoluted. It's hard to really determine what is a brand. Well, your brand is your story. It's your guts. So your brand, yeah, it is partially your logo, your colors, your font, your website. Everything that is you is your brand. And you have to realize, I have a personal brand and you have a personal brand. Whether you recognize that you have a personal brand or not is the big question. If you don't, it's probably something you should look into. Having a personal brand allows you to kind of move through things a little bit quicker, to be memorable. And having a personal brand really can facilitate a brand, a business also. Kind of a figurehead, someone to look at, someone who's memorable, someone who you can associate with and kind of remember. And that's important to have with your brand. So when we're talking about your brand, realize it does take time, and realize that if you're offering ownership, it's something that's going to build much quicker. But it's important to realize too that people have perceptions, and if your brand doesn't have a brand, people will create one for you. It is whatever they say it is, and in their mind and in their eyes, whatever they're seeing is correct. Whatever they're feeling is also correct. So it's important that you build a quality brand and a story behind your business, because if you don't, someone else will, and that can negatively impact your brand. It can also positively impact your brand, but it's more likely that it will negatively impact your brand, especially if you don't have the control over it. Again, a note here. You can't control the conversation, and you can't control the brand. You can build the brand, and you can put it out into the world and allow people to own it and have ownership in it, and it will evolve from there. Steering it in one direction or another may or may not happen. The community will carry the brand where it needs to go. So you have to start, because if you don't, someone else will. It's possible that they already might have done so. So the question this week is, what is the perception of your brand? Does it have one? And if it does and it's negative, you want to change that. Something you might think about. So next week we're going to talk about, if you have a perception, if your brand is a negative perception, what do? What are your next steps? How can you change that? Because it's really hard once people have a perception of who you are and what you're about and what you do and how things get done. It's hard to change that. But it's important to realize that you can do it and that you should do it, especially if it's negatively impacting your brand. So, perception of your brand, what is it? We want to know what that is, or what you think it is. And if you don't know, ask your audience. They'll tell you. This is Dallas J. Moore with SocialRepublic.com. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and come back here next week. We're going to talk about if you have a negative impression, if your brand is a negative and it's seen that way and the perception is negative, what we can do about that. So come back next week and we'll continue the conversation.